Hello, dear friends. We're sincerely happy to welcome you again. And today we're going to talk to the esteemed Igor Mikhailovich Danilov.
Greetings.
Igor Mikhailovich, in the previous video you touched on a very important topic. We were also talking about the alive and the dead. And you said, it's an interesting point, why do so many people, sane, normal, seemingly sensible people, obsessively desire or seek self-destruction? Especially now, when we are living in the end times, when our world is on the verge, and when climate disasters are taking place, we often hear people voice such a thought, well, it is high time. And we are very grateful to you for explaining that this kind of thought is also a desire of a large number of subpersonalities who actually produce such a background in a person. And this conversation reminded everyone once again that they are actually the carriers of hell and heaven within themselves. Guys had a lot of insights and reflections, and one of the interesting questions they asked, which I would like to begin our today's conversation with, I will read it out. It was once said in the sign video that the closer we get to the last day, the more active the dead will become, the more they will interfere in the lives of the living and begin to attack the living so that the living will choose life rather than death. They will actually force us to move in the direction of saving life. And the question is, will we hear the dead at the end of time? Will we be able to make the right decision in order to survive and give life even to them? So the guys came up with interesting questions. How can we hear the dead? What are they supposed to tell us or make us understand? How will they say it? If by means of thought, then, on the other hand, such thoughts and states that come, blast it all, let this whole world collapse, let it end soon, they are not quite constructive. And on the contrary, they contribute to the destruction of the world to a certain extent. How can a person hear them? Hear those subpersonalities inside himself?
Well, obviously not the way I hear you now and the way our friends hear both me and you.
By means of thought?
By means of thought too. No. Through thought you can hear, if let's say, a subpersonality is too active and strong, and it enters between consciousness and personality like third forces do, that is, by replacing consciousness, then we can hear a subpersonality as a thought. But to impact a thought directly, well, let's just say most subpersonalities, to put it carefully, won't be able to do that, to make us hear them. While the state, I mean our inner state, something that affects our mood, our feelings, and our perception, that's exactly, so to say, their voice, which we perceive. Well, in fact, it's not a voice, it is their feelings, if we can say so, which are transmitted to us from within, from the depth.
So later on, consciousness just sort of decodes it this way, converts it into a thought, right?
Well, yes, you're right. It sort of decodes, interprets in its own way, and so on. But more often than not, we perceive these states as our own. And again, look, let's consider a simple example, friends. Imagine there is a conversation going on, or some scene is being shown, or we are watching somewhere in the gadgets that the world is coming to an end. And we, without even thinking, say that it is high time. Thus, we have already judged this world and passed a sentence on it, forgetting that we are part of this world. A simple question is, how is this possible, friends? Where is our instinct of self-preservation? Where is our aspiration to live? And why is this happening? And the main thing is that we say this precisely from that inner sensation. You cannot even call it a feeling, it's a sensation. But it is kind of dominant and pressing. From the inside, later on, it engulfs our thoughts. It sets, let's say, a topic of reflection for us, and it basically affects our daily life very significantly. In general, if we take a look, the dead have a very strong influence on the living. It's enough for us to look at what is now happening in the world, and we will not understand it through logic. Well, yes, we can consider that someone benefits, someone doesn't benefit, but what we've come to, in the world as a whole, I mean in the economy, in geopolitics, and in the prospects, even in the prospect of, say, a nuclear war, right? Well, some people will say they're trying to stimulate their electorate and earn trust by playing with our feelings. Those who say that, I mean. But on the other hand, this is talked about. And there is already too much of it. Is this normal when people have a conversation that the whole world will be destroyed? Well,
They have no doubt that the end of this world will come soon, yes.
absolutely right.
Even if they say in the heat of the moment that this world deserves it, but inside they have no doubt that this world is already coming to an end, and by which scenario this world is developing so far.
This world is developing by exactly that kind of scenario which none of us, the living, would desire, so to say. Why? Because this is the futility of this world. It is the dead-end path of the whole civilization. Well, we don't have civilization, thank God. We have a community of people that is rapidly developing to no one knows where. So, the logic here is very simple. When sensible, intelligent, and even kind people say that this world deserves to be destroyed, at the same time dooming themselves to death, this is how the dead influence the living, how they influence our decision-making.
And how are they going to stir us up, so to say, in this direction, so that we somehow move and save?
You see, there's a paradox here. There's a paradox. Because subpersonalities are really afraid of death. The second one, I mean, they are afraid of that very precipice, that very abyss, and dissolving there. But their existence is also hard and unbearable. They want to get rid of suffering, but they are afraid of death. And it depends on what prevails. Let's put it simply, whatever life is, it is life. And they cling to it. So, no matter how much they want to end their suffering, and we feel that too, they also want to prolong their existence. And we feel that as well. The only question is, what will dominate and how we will react to that? Well, if we sort this out, they will certainly not vote for the creative society, let's say.
This is also interesting, because consciousness expects that they will surely stand up for us and want to live so much that they will start telling us some solutions or teach us something or say, look, the creative society, what a good life prospect you and I will have.
Wait, how will they say it if we perceive them only at sort of an intuitive or barely perceptible level?
Maybe thoughts will arise inside our heads such as, look, what great prospects await us in the creative society.
Prospects, but not for them. The thing is that those prospects which are opening up before humanity, before us, friends, in the creative society are not available to subpersonalities, while the development of a more perfect society is destructive for them. However, the point is that this way gives them a great postponement for many, many years, right? Nevertheless, they understand perfectly well that we as humankind will most likely choose not the creative society, but rather a single world government. Why? Because, after all, the dead have a very strong influence on the living. And look, they have a hierarchy. I mean in general. There, which is behind the shadow of life. There is a very rigid hierarchy. Similarly to that hierarchy, we build a hierarchy here. Just like the eternal fight for domination and power is going on there, in the same way we behave here. From this, there comes an understanding that people, even those very fighters against globalism, will be the first to run to vote for a single world government. As for the creative society, it is unlikely that they will want to vote for it.
The scenario of hierarchical structure
Of course.
is closer to them.
Certainly, they fight against it, but at the same time they dream of it.
It is interesting that when we inform about the creative society, there are indeed many sensible people who understand that a society which is not built on hierarchy is possible. But there are also a lot of people who call it utopian, because it turns out that the personalities inside them are not familiar with that scenario either.
No, there's also the factor that people have not familiarized themselves with it. They haven't grasped what the creative society is, so they tend to stereotypically brush it aside instead of studying the project. People judge, let's say, by the first words and say, no, this is unacceptable, how is such a thing possible? Right, in the consumerist format, it's impossible. People simply do not understand that the whole format changes across the globe. And immediately they come up with a question, who's going to give you permission? Yet who should we ask permission from?
Some higher authority is needed.
Yes, I mean, God is certainly not against it, while everything else should be done by people, moreover by all people, at all levels, including politicians and everyone. Then we have a chance to build the creative society and really prolong our stay here for thousands and billions of years. This is realistic.
You know, Igor Mikhailovich, an interesting point is observed that when people have learned that subpersonalities will urge people to somehow move, make the right decision and save their lives, we immediately notice how consciousness wants to shift their responsibility already onto subpersonalities, so
yes.
that they necessarily come up with a solution for us, teach us, for example, how to take responsibility, teach us how to act, so to say, sort of with a prospect for the future.
For some reason, we always want someone to do something for us. And just look, all legends say that someone will come and do everything. So, we elect a president and shift the entire responsibility onto him. He has to do it. If he doesn't, he's a bad guy, right? And if he does, well, sure thing, that's why we elected him for. That's how irresponsible we are. Yet, the time of responsibility has come. Everyone's responsibility. This is really so. At this time, no one will decide for us how to act, but our choice will affect the future, not only ours, but that of our relatives, friends, and the entire humankind. And this is really so. Yet, why does this happen? Why do we shift responsibility onto others? Well, I'll put it simply, we have been accustomed to it. We have really been turned into slaves. We have forgotten who we are, and we have stopped making decisions ourselves. On the other hand, we feel confident, we are free, we are protected, and we understand perfectly well that all this is a lie. None of us is protected from anyone or anything. We are well aware that in terms of existence in this world, there is no confidence in anything. Really no confidence in anything at all. The only confidence is that sooner or later our existence here will be over. There is no other confidence. There is no confidence that you will keep your job, that you will keep your house, that you will keep your health, and many other things are uncertain. In other words, a person is absolutely unprotected here in this world, and he is susceptible to negative influences not only here in our familiar three-dimensional world from people like us, meaning from other people, but a person is also susceptible to the influence of third forces, not to mention the dead. This is indeed so, and each of us feels it. And do you know what the strangest thing is? The strangest thing, in my opinion, is that people understand and feel perfectly well what is going on. All people are well aware, and this feeling doesn't even come from the former living, let's put it carefully. This feeling comes from deep inside, from there, as they say, from the heart or from the soul. This understanding clearly makes us realize that this world is finite and that we have to do something. And it actually pushes us to action. It comes more from personality. That is really from the soul to personality.
Without such a background of doom.
Absolutely right. And it indicates that we can do something. And here consciousness comes into play, which parries all this and says, what is there to fight against? Everything is fine after all. It may have rained somewhere, or there may have been an earthquake in some place. Is it the first earthquake on Earth or what? Well, a volcano has erupted, but it has always happened. It has got slightly warmer. Rejoice, it has become warmer, right?
Why is the system so carefree in us? Is it afraid of death?
Oh Oh, just because it's immortal. Here is the answer in unison to your question. The system itself is immortal. For it doesn't matter if a sphere exists or not. It has billions of such spheres. So why should it be worried about it? You know, I'll put it this way. Imagine, there's a certain website on the internet and everyone visits it, okay? One person doesn't visit it. That's it. One user drops out, but another will show up. It's the same for the system. It doesn't care if a sphere exists or not. But for us, as a user, it is extremely important. Why? Because this is our world. We cannot go beyond the sphere. And the end of its existence is not very desirable for those, let's say, who lived before us, but didn't become free. That's the point.
So our consciousness is mortal.
Right.
It is frightened, while the system itself is not?
Our consciousness is... The system is not, while our consciousness is certainly mortal. After all, that which becomes a subpersonality is our consciousness, both primary and secondary, and we as personality become a subpersonality too. But then we have a clear understanding, we hear and understand where consciousness is and where we are. We understand what it wants and how the world is arranged. But don't we understand this now? We simply do not invest our time and attention in exploring ourselves, in observing where thoughts come from and how they come. We spoke about it a million times already. Well, this is indeed true. Just observe. Observe how you perceive information, how you process it, and, in general, what's going on inside you, what you know, and what you don't know yet. After all, it's easy. It's enough just to sit down, calm down, and look inside yourself, taking into account the problem of that very climate, to think about the future of our planet, about your own future. And here's a paradox. When you think about the planet, it is finite. When you begin to think about your own future, then superficial perception switches on, and we kind of cannot even see death ahead of us. So as you and I already discussed, a person is on the verge of death due to illness or something else, but he continues to make plans for years to come. Consciousness doesn't perceive that. It doesn't perceive the concept of death. For it, death is the spiritual salvation of a human, as personality. That's what it doesn't want.
It is even interesting that when you know these scenarios, you see how consciousness certainly wants to take care of today. And I remember how you once spoke about subpersonalities, about the kind of life experience they have. They think only about how to quench their inner hunger here and now.
Yes.
So apparently subpersonalities will not teach us responsibility,
No.
because their path is precisely the path of irresponsibility.
If they had been responsible, they would be alive. But they became dead, which means they simply destroyed themselves. They doomed themselves to suffering and death. What kind of responsibility of the dead can we talk about?
What can they teach us, right?
And what can they teach us? Do they have the experience of life? No. They have the experience of manipulation and the experience of how to destroy their future. That's what they actually teach us.
To leave it for later.
Yes, that which you must have done yesterday, right? That's the way it happens. And who hasn't encountered such things? You see, this tangible world of ours, well, it is much simpler and more complicated at the same time. If we treat it superficially, without proper attention, it seems that everything is fine. It seems that we are settled well in life. If we do not think about ourselves, if we do not pay attention to our inner feelings and perception and just live by patterns, like any animal, then everything seems to be fine. Well, there are some problems, but they can be solved, especially if a person is more or less settled. But inside there is emptiness. And having become a slave to his own consciousness, a person already inevitably begins to die, meaning he already transitions into the state of subpersonality. Let's take a look at a simple example. A person lives, everything seems to be fine, everything is great, he has a family, a house, a job, and there is nothing to complain about at all. He gets up in the morning, the sun is shining, so he is supposed to rejoice. But why is there sadness inside? Why is there heaviness? Well, we begin to justify it by saying that we are thinking about the future. And now is the time of turbulence in the economy and in geopolitics, so perhaps because of that a person may feel some a heaviness inside, right?
He's trying to interpret it.
Uncertainty about tomorrow. Well, in fact, to be honest, there are no people who can take a deep breath right now and say freedom. No, they can say it, but what's the point? And what about feeling it with full breath as well as confidence in the future? That's the whole phenomenon, because inside people feel all the reality and the approaching finish line. That's why people are unhappy. Look how it occurs. It seems like, well, everything is simple. All it takes is for people to change, let's say their behavior, to choose something positive and everything will change. I'm not even talking about the creative society. To switch to positivity in general. Are people able to switch to positivity? Many will say, but the world is so negative, right? How can you switch to positivity in it? Well, that's exactly the point. Why do we need negativity? Why do we activate it? I'm not talking about the climate or anything like that now. I'm talking about relationships between people, countries, and so on. Why do we activate negativity? Why can't we find positivity and unite on what is positive? Because they're someone's interests. Well, even those whose interests give rise to these negative situations, so to say. Anyway, those people have negativity inside. So it turns out to be a vicious circle.
And how to get out of this circle, Igor Mikhailovich? How can people defeat this consciousness inside themselves?
By taking responsibility, to take a sensible look at what is happening, at what's going on around them, at what is really happening to the climate, to look responsibly at one's future, at one's family and friends, just to take responsibility. Now is the time of responsibility, that's a fact. Let's say, if a person really approaches his life, first of all, responsibly, he will understand what he should do. Any normal person will understand that the world needs to be changed, and it needs to be changed for the better. That's for sure.
I also remember you once said that Shaitan can be defeated, the system can be defeated only by openness and the truth.
And there is no other way. A liar can only be defeated by truth. That's the whole answer. Therefore, responsibility, truth, and God's love, and everything will be fine. In general, the topic regarding the dead is always uninteresting. They made their choice. They deserved what they received.
You know, Igor Mikhailovich, the main thing is what conclusions a person comes to inside himself. Also, the topic may be hard.
Well, it's not hard, it's unpleasant.
But it is very important, since you understand that responsibility is something that is characteristic of their life. Because being dead inside, you will be the one who will shift responsibility. Being dead inside, you will be the one who will postpone for later. And only by feeling this life inside, or at least striving for this true life, you will be the one who will take responsibility. That only their life can have responsibility, and it contributes to life.
So, friends, let's take responsibility.
Responsibility of the alive.
First of all, responsibility of the alive, and let's just love each other. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, friends. Peace be with you.